My name is Brian Gross. I am the Deputy Director of NOAA's Geophysical Fluid Dynamics Laboratory. So scientists at the Geophysical Fluid Dynamics Laboratory work primarily with numerical data. We run numerical models on some of the largest computers in the world, and these models are models of the entire Earth system. Climate and biology, land ecology, number of different components beyond just the physical climate system. Our data management is primarily driven by the workflow of our experiments. Our numerical experiments can run for months on these supercomputers. It can generate thousands of electronic files, including the output of the model. It can generate thousands of gigabytes of data, and this is an enormous amount of data to try and manage. All of these files are moving from wherever the computing is being done to the scientist's desktop. It's also being moved from one level of storage and archiving to another, for example, from tape to disk and disk to tape. So there's an awful lot of data movement that's going on. In order to ensure the integrity of the science that we're doing, we need to be sure that we can reproduce experiments that we perform. Quality control is the tunnel through which all of our data must pass before any of it shows up on GFDL's data portal, and hence can be viewable by the climate research community. Part of the service that a lab like GFDL performs for the community is to release the models as well as the data. But it is only after a very rigorous quality control procedure that those models are deemed releasable, right? We do not want to release a model to the public that isn't up to a very high standard of scientific quality. And so we use quality control and the peer review process in particular to vet these models. So the most important lesson that I've learned in data management is never assume. Never assume that the data is what you think it's going to be. Never assume the data is what it should be. Verification of data, whether it is the physical plausibility of your answer or the fact that the bits have to be in the right order. All of this is something that a scientist needs to monitor very, very closely. I think as a federal scientist, there is a sort of a benefit and a burden to being a federal scientist in the sense that all of your work needs to be transparent. So the burden and the benefit of transparency is everything you do as a scientist is exposed, and it should be exposed. The science is a very objective pursuit. The interrelationships that any particular scientist has with the scientific community is less objective, it is subjective. It requires all of the human traits to communicate, to collaborate, to negotiate. And that level of transparency at the federal level is out there. Federal scientists are subject to FOIAs where their email conversations are exposed to the requester if they're relevant to the request. That kind of transparency, to me, is a positive. It ensures that integrity is going on in the science. But I'd like to think that that's not something that scientists are threatened with. It is something that scientists naturally do. And my experience has been that when, for example, a FOIA request comes down, although it may be a burden to collect all your emails, for example, and deliver them to the requester, there's very little trouble doing that in terms of, well, boy, did I say something I shouldn't have said? That doesn't happen. Because I don't think scientists intentionally do anything to try and subvert the process. It is the subjective communications where you are negotiating, collaborating, cajoling, the human side of doing science. That's when things can be misinterpreted. The science is what it is. That part needs to be transparent, and it is transparent. It's what's published in the journals. The human side of doing science, I think, is the part that a federal scientist also needs to understand will be visible and transparent. I would be troubled by anybody coming in and sort of saying, well, I'm going to hide this discussion over here, when it is relevant for advancing the science. They can have conversations with their auto mechanic that they don't want FOIA'd, and I understand that. But when it comes to their job, doing science at a federal laboratory, everything needs to be transparent.